Marion County case, which went all the way to the Supreme Court, where Posner's ruling was affirmed. If there was evidence that jurors can change their mind upon review of additional subsequent evidence, this is it. If there was ever a concise and airtight case made against photo ID laws and the threat it poses to our modern basic rights to vote, this is it. His dissent includes a devastating response to virtually every false or disingenuous right-wing argument or talking point ever put forth in support of voter ID. This is the same thing that Texas Perry would say fraud and his associate Wheelchair Abbott, and these various other people, Boss Walker in Wisconsin, and these other zealots. But the situation is, in many of these states, there has not been a case of voter fraud. In fact, we didn't hear about voter IDs and all these sorts of things until the Democrats started winning elections. Not even when Bill Clinton was running, and he won a three different parties, a three-candidate election, and his re-election. But then we heard of it after G.W. Dummy Bush stole the election from Albert Gore of Tennessee in 2000. And the Supreme Court intervened there, which they never should have done, and we should have put millions of people in the streets of Washington, D.C., and refused to leave. The right did not have their tea parties. The Second Amendment people, they would not come to Washington, D.C. You can take that one to the bank also. Let's go on here. His dissent included a devastating response. I'm sorry. Let me get the pointer going here. I should have the teleprompter up here, but I don't on this. Let me get to the crux of this, and we'll go to his. Posner is by far the most widely read, and there's no doubt about that, cited legal scholar of the 20th century, as according to the Journal of Legal Studies. His opinions are closely studied by the Supreme Court, where the battle over legality and constitutionality of photo ID laws will almost certainly wind up at some point in not too distant future. The opinion, written on behalf of 5 judges of the Seventh Circuit, fairly disambers such notions as these laws are meant to deal with phantom voter fraud concern. Out of 146 million registered voters, this is a ratio of 1 case of voter fraud for every 14.6 million eligible voters. Just call it 15 million. The evidence shows then to be little more than barely a partisan attempt to keep Democratic voters from voting. Conservative states try to make it as difficult for people who are out of the mainstream. There's no doubt about that. Such laws present evidence of impersonation fraud that is downright goofy, if not paranoid. Well, I've heard these paranoids always talk about these so-called phantom voters. When I ask them where are these phantom voters, they say all around. I said, well, how many phantom voters did you find the last election? They could not come up with one. I said, well, let's go back to the next election 4 years ago, and 4 years before that, they had none. It was just an excuse. New studies, well, we won't get into all that. This is a longer article. We want to stick more with Judge Posner. There's far too much in it to appropriately encapsulate here for now. But it was written in large in response to an appellate court ruling last week by the right-wing judge Frank Easterbrook, which contained one embarrassing falsehood and error after another, including the voter ID being required to board airplanes. Now, this is something that's an absolute lie. Open bank accounts, buy beer, and guns. We took it apart in just one paragraph, Easterbrook's ruling last year, but Posner took it apart in his colleague's entire error-prone mess of a ruling. His favorite passage there. The panel is not troubled by the absence of evidence. It is indeed the supported beneficial effect of photo ID on public confidence in the electoral system. a legislative fact and a proposition about the state of the world, and asserts that a matter of legislative facts, court accepted findings, legislature and judges in lower courts must accept findings by the Supreme Court. And in saying so, the panel conjured up a fact-free concoction in which to lodge the federal judiciary in the state of Wisconsin. The legislature said that witches are a problem. Should the Wisconsin legislature permit it to conduct witch trials? If the Supreme Court once thought that the required photo identification increased public confidence in elections, and experience and academic studies have since shown that the court was mistaken, we do not do a favor to the court. We do a favor. We increase public confidence in the election by making a mistake based on our decision. Let me just go down here. As one remember, once again, he did write that iconic decision there, Judge Posner on the 7th Circuit, approving the first voter ID law. We don't have to get that, but let's go to his. There's some misconceptions about voter ID and what is going on. Like at the airports, the photo ID there is not required to board a plane. And I hope we can get this up here. This is by Justice Posner. And let me quickly browse through this. The panel, well, we won't get into all that. Let's go through this as quickly as possible. And just find a couple of things here. Many people who might find it difficult to obtain photo IDs can vote absentee and therefore excused from having to present. This is the Wisconsin law, not the law on the Texas Perry and Wheelchair Abbott. The Indiana law, now this is Indiana. This is the one that was the paramount ruling by Judge Posner. Permits voters without a photo ID to cast provisional ballots. Many states do that. Within 10 days after the election, present a photo ID to a circuit court clerk. Indigent voters unable to procure a photo ID by the deadline by executing an affidavit confirming their ID. It does permit voters to cast provisional ballots and later supplies. This is Wisconsin. We're moving between two states there. Let me get down. We've already given you the numbers. And they do provide free IDs in some states. But still, people have to find birth certificates, etc., take off of work. It's not as easy as you would think it would be. Social Security records, if there's an error there, they're just moving all around in upholding the Indiana statute, both Crawford opinion in the Supreme Court's plurality opinion noted that Indiana voter rolls were substantially inflated. They contained 1.3 million more names than registered voters. The Supreme Court also cited a commission on electoral reform, which was absolutely a lie. And let me get down here. There's no evidence, well, we won't even get into that one. We just keep on going. A lot of this anecdotal evidence is the same as in the case there of Mr. Duncan. For those who live in Illinois are familiar with a variety of voting fraud, no doubt about that. As the representative from Harlem, the lion himself, Charlie Rangel, would say, his wish would be to die and be reborn in Chicago. That way he could vote forever. 32 states require voters to present some form of identification. And here's some of the photo. The strict states are Arkansas, Texas, Georgia, Indiana, Virginia, Kansas, Wisconsin, and Mississippi. And the non-strict ones are Alabama, Florida, Hawaii, Idaho, nobody's in Idaho, Louisiana, Michigan, Rhode Island, and South Dakota. And the non-photo ID states, Arizona, North Dakota, Ohio. That, I believe, has changed. In Alaska, Montana, Colorado, Oklahoma, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Delaware, South Carolina, Utah, Missouri, Kentucky, and Washington State. Let me move past this. I wanted to get to the part, go into all these, about the airport ID and Judge Posner's situation there. And we go to some others there, studies. They never found any voter ID there. Hood and Gillespie in their article, they just do not vote like they used to as a methodology to empirically assess election voter fraud. After examining, this one did 2.1 million votes cast during the general election in 2006. In Georgia, we found no evidence of electoral fraud. Period. So this kind of tells you the depth of the problem there, if there is a problem. There is not. And this goes on and on and on there about these various situations involved here. A bank customer does not need, and this is where let me see if I can get to the rest of this. We got the bank customer here. Okay, the panel suggested that obtaining a photo ID a voter can't be a big deal because you need a photo ID to fly. That's absolutely not true. This is from the Transportation Security Administration. Despite the 9/11 attacks that killed thousands, the photo ID is not considered essential to air safety. It seems beyond odds that it would be considered to electoral validity. The panel piled error on error there, no doubt about it. In 35 states, including Wisconsin, you do not need a photo ID to pick up prescriptions. Now, if you pick up Sudafed, I found that out with the pharmacist. I don't use Sudafed, but you did need a photo ID for that because of methamphetamine that people make. Bank customers do not need a photo ID to open an account. This is from the U.S. Treasury Office of Controller of the Currency. Federal law does not require a photo ID to purchase firearms at a gun show, flea market, or online. So these are some things the Supreme Court just completely erred in their decision. The panel said in the same paragraph in the opinion, the district court finding that 300,000 registered voters lacked photo ID in Wisconsin. In this case, see if we can get trying to sum this up. But this is actually Judge Posner's opinion. And even Nate Silver gets into the act, measuring of the effectiveness of voter identification laws. This is on the 15th of July, 2012. The aggregate effect of strict voter ID requirements in depressing turnout does not appear to be huge, but has been estimated as deterring or disqualifying 2% of otherwise eligible voters. And 2% can be very, very large indeed. The Crawford case, only 43,000 Indiana residents lack the ID, 330,000 in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a smaller population at 5.6 million versus 5.7 million versus 5.6 million in Indiana. But still, that is a lot of people. And now remember, this the numbers go up. So there have been various studies on voter ID laws. Let's get through Judge Posner's decision here. Every legislative fact are not sacrosanct. There's no doubt about that. They're talking about anecdotal evidence getting into the wrong places. This is worse. But as Judge Posner has proved, we eventually find out what the actual facts are and not assume